Welcome to the Vital Mentality Podcast. I'm your host, Angel Munro, and we're talking all things health. Short disclaimer, this is not intended as medical advice. This is for general purposes only. Today we're talking about health and vitality through a terrain lens. What does that mean? And unpacking the difference between allopathic medicine and terrain medicine as best we can. So allopathic medicine or general Western medicine, the main hypothesis for disease is either germs or genes, or if it isn't either of those two, it's bad luck. And when we look at it through a terrain lens, terrain theory, it's more about the inner terrain of the body as being the determinant for health or disease. And a way that I like to think of it is, I think with the allopathic model, there's this, because disease is thought of as being random, when it's germs or genes, that there is a magic bullet at the end of that equation, that there's something that can save you from one of those things. And I think that even happens in natural medicine, that a herb or a supplement might be the savior. But health is really about habit stacking, whether you're stacking in a negative way or a positive way. And it's our daily inputs that determines our health, which I think is great because it puts us in the driver's seat, which is, I think, the best place to be. And germs, genes, bad luck, that is really coming from a place of victim consciousness. And Kelly Brogan, who's a doctor, I think she did a really good job associating that victim consciousness. There's a model called the Karpman triangle, which is often used in psychology. And in the Karpman triangle, you have a victim, a villain, a hero, and a hero. And I think it's really applicable to the health system. So the victim being the individual, the villain being the germ or the gene or the bad luck, and the hero being the doctor or the treatment, or even the naturopath or the herb. It's always this cycle. And when you look at health through a terrain perspective, it takes us out of that victim mentality and puts us, like I said, in the driver's seat, which is a way much better place to be in. When we think of disease, we think of symptoms, and we associate the symptoms as disease. And when you're looking at things from a terrain perspective, the symptoms are actually the medicine. We seem to understand this pretty well when we're talking about, say, if you get a splinter and there's a bit of pus and then there's swelling and redness. And most people can comprehend that the pus and the swelling is there to push the splinter out. The same happens in the rest of the body. There's an insult that's come from somewhere, which we'll talk about what that is in a little while. The body tries to release, it's usually toxicity, which can happen from multiple different angles. And the body tries to release that toxicity and regenerate the tissue. And we interrupt it thinking that that's the disease, and then we end up causing more disease. There's another doctor read out this quote from Florence Nightingale. It was Tom Cowan. I heard him read it out on a podcast a year or so ago, and I'm going to copy because it's such a great quote and it really describes what's happening in disease. So this is Florence Nightingale. There are no specific diseases, only specific disease conditions. All disease at some period or another of its course is more or less a reparative process, not necessarily accompanied with suffering, an effort of nature to remedy a process of poisoning or of decay which has taken place weeks, months, sometimes years beforehand, unnoticed. Yeah, so basically saying the injury's already happened. The body, in its effort to get back to homeostasis, gets rid of any debris that's happened from that original injury, and that's what we call symptoms, and we associate as disease, but it's actually the healing. And the only thing I would add to that is that sometimes that injury is ongoing. So if you're getting constant symptoms, say you've got a rash that won't get away, or you have to get to the bottom of what that injury is, because sometimes it might be ongoing. Say there's toxic building products which are leaching in your home, or you're buying something from the supermarket, it's got a particular additive in it and that's causing problems. Yeah, sometimes the injury can be ongoing, and that's when we need to investigate and work out what changes you can make in your life to stop that injury. But often when we get an acute illness like a cold or a flu, the damage is done. It could even just be a weather adjustment, which is why things like that happen in seasonal changes, like coming into winter. People often get sick. But yeah, it could be something that's happened in the past and the body is actually finding balance. We know actually two examples of how detrimental it is to stop an acute illness like cold and flu. There's an association with stopping fevers and a higher risk of cancer later on in life. I think it really highlights the fact that cold and flu actually is a detoxification process, and when you interrupt it, the body has to store that toxic material somewhere in the body, and then we later call that, turns into a mass, we later call that cancer. Yeah, so that's actually well documented in the literature now, and you'll find most hospitals and pediatrics doctors will say not to interrupt a fever anymore. That's really outdated information, although it's still definitely marketed with things like paracetamol and things like Nurofen. We should not be interrupting fevers. Same thing goes with antibiotics. Everyone pretty much knows now that antibiotics causes huge disturbances to the microbiome. We now know that the microbiome controls so much in the body and is such a determinant of health. You can attribute a damaged microbiome to almost every single disease. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, but we still continue to take them. We're basically made up of proteins, bacteria, and water. So we should never be killing bacteria. That's killing ourselves. But yet this is prescribed over and over and over again for things like cold and flu, which are self-healing mechanisms. So we're really doing ourselves a disservice. I'm going to talk in a little bit about what causes disease, but the reason why I'm highlighting this at the moment, because I think one of the biggest causes of disease, of chronic diseases, is a result of us interrupting this normal, natural healing process that we've got, which we call cold and flu. If we stopped interrupting those things, we would be so much better off for it. I'll put a couple of books in here too on this topic. There's a really good book called Can You Catch a Cold? I think it's mandatory reading for everyone. Yeah, so if it's not germs, genes, bad luck that causes disease, what does cause disease? So emotional and spiritual issues. Chinese medicine knew that emotional issues were a huge cause of disease, like unresolved emotions. And we know that like stress is a major cause for all kinds of disease, and that having like emotional stress rises cortisol. Too much cortisol becomes an endotoxin, so a toxin that we built up ourselves in the body. And yeah, there's a biological effect from not dealing with our emotions or from having prolonged stress for a long period of time. So it's a huge cause of disease. We're also energetic beings, not looking after our spiritual, energetic selves. Yeah, it causes disease. Toxins, I'll go over the toxins in more detail in a minute, but poor nutrition as well. It's a funny one because, everyone's always saying there's so many arguments about what the perfect diet should be, vegan or should be carnivore, or some people, you see people on the internet saying, vegetables will kill you or dairy will kill you, whatever. It's super confusing. But to me, poor nutrition is processed food, anything that's denatured. Basically, if it's not, you should be eating food in its natural form as much as possible. So cooking as much food from scratch as much as possible, and food that's not poisoned. So no pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, buying organic or growing your own food. Yeah, if you're doing those things, then generally you're okay. In store-bought food, even in like things like dairy and condiments and stuff, if you're not careful, there can be a lot of hidden additives. And, in things like condiments and stuff, lots of seed oils and things that are really detrimental to our health. So it's not so much that, say it's like a tomato sauce. There's nothing wrong with tomato sauce if it's made with all the crap. So, or ice cream, ice cream can be a health food. I make it myself with raw organic sugar and raw eggs that my chickens laid and milk and some vanilla bean. And there's and some cream, organic cream. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you buy it from the supermarket and it's got a million ingredients with words in it that you can't pronounce, then it's not a health food. So, yeah, clean, seasonal, unpoisoned food, that's good nutrition. And I would also put into the realm of poor nutrition, undereating and overeating. People bicker about how much fats, proteins, carbs. I think it gets too complicated. Just make sure you get some of all of them every day. And yeah, the quality is high, and then you're fine. Light is a really big topic at the moment. We're constantly under artificial light, and our bodies are designed to absorb light through the eyes, natural light through the eyes. Our bodies work as an endocrine organ. So the endocrine system in the body basically kind of regulates hormones, your circadian rhythm, so your sleep-wake cycle, and your metabolism. And it does this through the information it gets through natural light. So constantly being under blue light, which happens when we're inside, that is a toxin. And we're also built to move. And so a sedentary lifestyle, not moving, that is a toxin. We are meant to integrate with the earth. We're meant to have our feet on the ground. We're meant to have our hands in the dirt, not our I guess you could say we could be deficient in nature by not interacting with nature. So that results in toxicity in the body as well, because our the earth has an electrical field. Like I mentioned before, we have an electrical field, and we need to interact with the earth element on a regular basis. Another thing that can cause disease is injury and surgery. These things are not always avoidable, but I guess there needs to be an awareness, that scar tissue causes stagnation, and that can lead to, once you get that energetic block, because we're a hydroelectric being, we have an electrical current, and when there's blockages in that, more disease can occur. So unfortunately, when that does happen, sometimes the awareness around that means that we place extra care on healing that area. And there's many different ways that you can do that to, to reduce the amount of scar tissue that you have. Dental work can lead to lots of issues, so avoiding keeping, being as careful as you can with your teeth so you don't have that problem is really important. And like I mentioned, stopping acute illness is such a big one. So all of those things that I mentioned had an element of toxins building up in the body one way or another, whether it's being produced from not getting the right kind of nutrition, or from toxins in food, or from being under too much stress. But other forms of toxins to be aware of, things like heavy metals, pesticides, which I mentioned, pharmaceuticals, which I mentioned, toxic building materials, additives in food, like I mentioned already, and microplastics is a big one. So mentioning these things is not to scare anyone, but what I was talking about before about being in the driver's seat, when you have an awareness of these things causing disease, and actually if you look in the medical literature, I'll find a link, put it in the show notes, a lot of what we say is genetic disease is damage from toxicity. So being aware, being armed with this information, it means that you make choices on a daily basis, what food you're buying, whether you're filtering your water, what products you're putting on your skin, what products you're building your house with, what products you're cleaning your body with, perfume, clothes, etc. You make these small decisions every day, like I was talking about before, habit stacking, and that with this awareness you can really live quite well, and with the absence of disease, because you've done these small steps every day. I think when you boil it down, that disease could be said that it was a disconnection from spirit and nature, because when you're looking after your energy, when you're looking after your spiritual self and emotional self, and when you're living in a way that nature intended, that's when you thrive. And I kind of touched on these things before, but I like to think of it, if we didn't have all this modernity, all of these man-made products, and we thought that the body was perfectly designed to interact on this earth, then what does that mean? It means that, like, what would we need? So our feet would be on the ground every day. Our eyes would be getting natural light all day and firelight at night. Our skin would be exposed to sun regularly. We always would be having natural food, always fresh air. Our feet would be interacting with dirt, and our hands would be interacting with dirt. So even though there is all this modernity, and even though there are all these like artificial things around us, we can still make those connections on a daily basis. And I know personally, since I started living that way, thinking about what my body needed on a daily basis, it completely transformed my health and my life. Yeah, and it's so just such a nicer way to live. Yeah, so feet in the ground, hands in the earth, fresh air, sun and firelight, and seasonal food. Like, they're the fundamentals, the bare essentials that we need. And community and joy. That's so important as well. I think that gets forgotten about a lot or put aside. But, disconnected people, without community and without joy and purpose, and it never ends up well health-wise. And just with that remembrance that we are nature, I think looking at the elements is a, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda did this. Really, people have been acknowledging this in medicine for thousands of years, but we've forgotten that. But using the elements as a kind of marker to stay on track. So what do I mean by this? So when we get to the warmer months, nature provides us with watery, cooling foods, like cucumbers and tomatoes and zucchinis. And nature naturally does this. It balances out the elements with the other elements. So if you are having heat based kind of symptoms, say that you were overheating, or you were getting rashes or something like that, what water elements could you bring in to remedy that when the weather gets cold and you need to bring some warmth into your body? What can you do? Like warm drinks, saunas, spicy foods, these things to warm the body up. And yeah, I think it's a really nice way to think about it. Like, how can you bring the elements in? If you're feeling airy and flighty and ungrounded, then bring in grounding. Take your shoes off and put your feet on the earth. I think we can look to nature for our medicine much more than we do. Anyway, I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. And it's just, such a general overview of how I view health. But if you need help with anything on a deeper level than what we've spoken about, my consultations are available for booking online via my website. I'll put the link in the show notes. I've got lots of products on the shop, including things, we were talking about water. And there's so many toxins in our drinking water. I sell water filters on there, and all kinds of other great things to live a natural life. So go and have a look at that. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for listening.